Hey guys! Today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. They say love knows no age, and to a large extent, that's true. However, a significant age gap between partners can play a crucial role in how a relationship develops and whether it stands the test of time. The case of young Nadine Hinterholzer in the fall of 2018 rocked all of Austria. The tragedy unfolded in the quiet resort town of Kitzbühel, a favorite winter sports destination. What began as a romantic love story turned into a bloody crime with 5 innocent victims. A young woman named Nadine Hinterholzer was born on May 13, 1999. She grew up in the picturesque mountain town of Kitzbühel, Austria, a popular ski resort with a population of fewer than 9,000 residents. Nadine was the younger of 2 siblings born to Rupert and Andrea, and was raised alongside her older brother Kevin, who was 5 years her senior. The Hinterholzer family was financially well off. The parents ran a successful souvenir business, owned a spacious 2-story home, and provided a comfortable life for their family. Rupert and Andrea raised their son and daughter in an environment of love, trust, and open communication. They prioritized quality education and did everything they could to help their kids explore their talents. From a young age, Nadine was active and full of energy. While she wasn't a straight-A student, she performed well in school and had a deep love for literature and poetry. Her true passion, however, was dance. Nadine took it seriously and dreamed of pursuing it as a career. Her parents supported her wholeheartedly, covering costs for studio sessions and master classes with professional choreographers. Nadine was known for her friendly and cheerful nature. She had many friends, fit in easily with different groups, and could make a connection with just about anyone. As a teenager, she blossomed into a striking young woman, with refined features, long flowing hair, and a slender, graceful figure. She often caught the attention of admirers, but she preferred to spend her time dancing rather than dating. At the age of 14, Nadine met a young man named Andreas. He was 20 at the time. He had gone to school with her older brother, Kevin, but had never been to the Hinterholzer household before. When Nadine and Andreas first crossed paths, there was an immediate connection. They felt a spark and quickly developed mutual affection. However, the 6-year age difference presented a major obstacle. She was still a minor in high school, while Andreas was already considered an adult. They exchanged phone numbers and initially kept their conversations to calls and social media messages. A week later, Andreas asked Nadine to go for a walk with him, and from then on, they began secretly seeing each other. Neither Nadine's friends nor her family knew about these meetings. Both she and Andreas were aware that their relationship could bring serious legal trouble given her age at the time. A few months into their relationship, Nadine confided in her best friend that she was seeing an older guy and that it was getting serious. For the first time in her life, she felt deeply in love. Andreas told her he wanted a future with her, talking about starting a family and getting married once she turned 18. Eventually, Nadine cautiously opened up to her mother about the changes in her life and mentioned she had met someone special. Andrea was initially concerned, fearing her daughter might get hurt, but suggested Nadine invite her boyfriend over for a family dinner so they could meet him in person and better understand his intentions. Andreas prepared thoroughly for the evening, wanting to make a positive impression. He behaved respectfully, expressed genuine feelings for Nadine, and said he supported her completing school and pursuing an education. Rupert and Andrea warmed up to him. He seemed mature, thoughtful, and trustworthy. Kevin also vouched for Andreas, confirming that he was a good guy from a respectable family. The dinner went smoothly. Nadine's choice was welcomed by both her parents and her brother. From that point on, Andreas became a frequent and welcomed guest in the Hinterholzer home. When Nadine turned 16, Andreas, with the full approval of Rupert and Andrea, moved into their home. The teenager and her boyfriend were now living together like a married couple. Nadine's parents treated Andreas like a son, understanding that their relationship was serious. In return, he built strong bonds with her family, earning their trust and affection. Andreas got along well with his would-be in-laws, always trying to be respectful and helpful around the house. He and Kevin, Nadine's older brother, became close friends, developing a strong bond. Even the family dog quickly warmed up to the new addition in their household. Andreas hadn't forgotten the promises he made. He supported Nadine through her final years of high school, encouraging her to graduate and think seriously about her future career path. He was attentive and nurturing, trying to build a relationship based on love and mutual respect. Once they began living under the same roof, the couple updated their relationship statuses on social media to engaged. They regularly posted photos together, smiling and radiating happiness, spending most of their free time side by side. But over time, Andreas became more controlling. While it seemed like he was just looking out for Nadine, he closely monitored her actions and wanted to know where she was at all times. He grew increasingly possessive, and since they had started dating, Nadine had cut off contact with any male friends. While her parents saw this as protection, in reality, it marked the beginning of a pattern of control. In 2017, Nadine graduated from high school and celebrated her 18th birthday. Around that time, the couple decided to move out. Nadine's grandmother offered her a cozy apartment in a central part of town, giving them their own space. Andreas immediately brought up marriage again, but Nadine asked him to slow down. She wasn't ready to make that kind of commitment yet, and to his credit, Andreas didn't pressure her, at least not openly. Cracks began to show in their relationship. Nadine decided to take a gap year before enrolling in college. She wanted to focus on her passion for dance, earn a driver's license, and brush up on her French. Paris had always been a dream destination for her. She had many plans for her future, but marriage and starting a family weren't among them at the moment, which deeply disappointed Andreas. As they settled into the apartment gifted by Nadine's grandmother, everyday life began to weigh on their relationship. Andreas worked long hours as a construction worker and would come home exhausted, wanting nothing more than to relax in front of the TV. Nadine, on the other hand, was full of energy. She wanted to go out, hang out with friends, attend dance classes, and enjoy life. Every morning, she would head to the dance studio. Later, she met up with her old school friends for driving lessons. Then they'd grab coffee or go shopping. Though she was now legally an adult, Nadine still had the spirit of a teenager, eager for fun, easily bored by routine. The age gap between her and Andreas began to feel more noticeable. To Nadine and her friends, Andreas started to seem older, almost like someone from a different stage of life. They shared fewer interests and had less to talk about. Nadine had to ask for permission just to go out in the evening with her friends. Andreas, often too tired to join her, struggled to let her go without him, largely due to his jealousy and possessiveness. This created frequent tension. The more Andreas mentioned marriage and a future family, the more irritated Nadine became. She felt like he was trying to tie her down, to keep her at home, out of sight, and locked into a life she wasn't ready for. She didn't want to give up her dreams. Nadine wanted to shine, to become a professional dancer, perform in major shows, and make a name for herself. She had the talent and determination, and she wasn't about to throw it all away. More than once, Nadine told Andreas that she needed a break, some time to live apart and think about her feelings, to figure out whether their relationship still had a future. But Andreas didn't take her seriously. He laughed it off, convinced she was only saying it to get a rise out of him. After all, he believed that the girl he had shaped into his ideal partner since her teenage years would never actually leave. Still, Nadine increasingly confided in her friends and close circle about her intention to end the relationship for good. Her parents chose not to interfere in her personal life, believing the couple needed to figure things out on their own. Her friends, however, fully supported her decision. They felt there was no point in pushing forward with a wedding when the relationship was already falling apart and the affection they once shared had long since faded. While Andreas was busy planning a proposal and imagining their future together, Nadine was trying to figure out how to ask him to move out without sparking a confrontation. In June 2018, shortly after celebrating her 19th birthday, she brought up the topic of separation again. This time, she was more assertive, but still tried to keep things peaceful, suggesting they remain friends. At 25, Andreas decided to play along. He believed that if he went along with Nadine's wishes, she would calm down, reflect on the situation, and come running back. He thought that once she truly felt she might lose him, she'd have a change of heart. It took Andreas a couple of weeks to pack up his things, and by early July, he moved back into his parents' house. He still didn't see the breakup as final. Meanwhile, Nadine told her friends the relationship was officially over. She was clear that they were just friends now, and nothing more would come of it. She also noted that Andreas had never been aggressive or harsh with her, and that he had accepted the breakup with apparent calm. After they split, the former couple remained part of the same social circle, and continued to run into each other at gatherings with mutual friends. Andreas also maintained his friendship with Kevin, Nadine's brother, and frequently visited the Hinterholzer family home, where he was still welcomed as part of the household. Rupert and Andrea treated him with the same warmth and kindness, continuing to support him and consider him like a son. It's likely that Andreas used these family ties as a way to stay close to Nadine, quietly hoping for reconciliation. He believed her parents might influence her to give him another chance, and he waited patiently. He never missed a family dinner, always seizing the opportunity to be near Nadine and have even the briefest of conversations. But Nadine started to sense that Andreas hadn't truly moved on. In fact, she began to doubt whether he had ever accepted their breakup at all. Every time they met at her parents' house, she felt uneasy. Andreas looked at her with a quiet intensity, as if waiting for her to invite him back into her life. Even Kevin realized that Andreas hadn't taken the separation seriously. He believed Andreas viewed the breakup as a temporary mood swing, something Nadine would snap out of. The young man kept talking about his ex, constantly asking Kevin and her parents whether Nadine had mentioned him or shown signs of wanting to get back together. When they said no, Andreas dismissed it, assuming she just wasn't comfortable discussing such personal topics with her family. He was sure she'd reach out eventually. Andreas's behavior started to take on a darker tone. What had once seemed like heartbreak now resembled a kind of obsessive fixation. He spoke about Nadine constantly, showed up at places she frequented, and did everything he could to grab her attention. He bombarded her with calls and messages, dozens each day. Every time they saw each other, he apologized, promised to change, and begged for a second chance. But Nadine remained firm in her decision. Andreas began showing up wherever Nadine went, which increasingly frustrated her. Still, he tried not to cause a scene. He acted calm, offered to walk her home or pick up the tab, even though he knew she'd turn him down every time. He convinced himself that Nadine was just testing his patience, and that eventually she'd come around. Nearly 3 months passed this way. Andreas refused to accept reality and kept bringing up their supposed wedding plans, even though Nadine had made it clear that she viewed their relationship as a youthful mistake. In September, she repeated this in front of her family during a dinner at her parents' home when Andreas was once again a guest. Clearly hurt by her words, he quickly composed himself and changed the subject, acting as if nothing had happened. Nadine began avoiding all contact with her ex. She told friends she felt like she was being followed and that she no longer wanted even a friendship with Andreas. But Andreas told a different story. He insisted that Nadine secretly wanted his attention, wanted him to chase her and cater to her every whim. Everything changed on October 5th, 2018, 3 months after their breakup. That Friday evening, Andreas and Kevin decided to go out to a bar together to relax and catch up. There were no warning signs that anything unusual was about to happen. After sharing just 1 beer each, Andreas suggested They step out for some fresh air and try another pub. They did this several times, hopping from place to place, 5 venues in total, until they finally walked into a bar where Nadine happened to be out with a group of her friends. At that moment, Kevin realized the bar hopping hadn't been random. Andreas had been searching for Nadine, and now that he had found her, he refused to leave. He walked straight toward her table. Kevin tried to stop him, but wasn't quick enough, and he had a bad feeling about how this would go. Among Nadine's friends was a young man neither Kevin nor Andreas recognized. He was sitting next to Nadine, and the two were smiling, laughing, and clearly enjoying themselves. Seeing this, Andreas became visibly agitated. He rushed over, grabbed Nadine by the arm, and tried to pull her away. It was the first time he had acted this aggressively, and it frightened Nadine deeply. One of the people nearby immediately stepped in to defend her. He introduced himself as Florian Jan. Calm but firm, he told Andreas they should step outside if there was something that needed to be resolved. Florian was tall, athletic, and a rising talent in professional hockey. If things had come to blows, Andreas likely wouldn't have stood a chance, and he knew it, choosing to back off before anything physical could happen. Andreas started accusing Nadine of betrayal. Florian explained that he and Nadine were just friends and not romantically involved, but that did nothing to calm Andreas. Kevin barely managed to get his friend outside before things escalated. Once outside, Andreas broke down. He cried, talked about betrayal, and insisted he wouldn't allow himself to be treated that way. Kevin called a cab and convinced Andreas to go home. Then, concerned that his friend might come back, he returned to the bar and told Nadine she should head home for the night. Florian offered to come with her. Worried for her safety and genuinely caring for her, he stayed at the house to make sure she felt safe. Around 3 a.m., Andreas drove to Nadine's apartment. When he didn't find her there, he realized she had likely stayed the night at her parents' house and headed in that direction. As he pulled into their driveway, he spotted a car he didn't recognize, but he instantly assumed it belonged to Florian Jana. A few hours earlier, that same car had been parked outside the bar where Nadine had been with her new companion. Fueled by jealousy and frustration, Andreas began pounding on the door, shouting for Nadine. But instead of her, a sleepy Rupert answered. He didn't want to call emergency services. Despite everything, he still felt sympathy for his former future son-in-law. Rupert chose to handle it calmly, asking Andreas to wait until morning when everyone would be awake and they could talk things over rationally. Rupert's approach seemed to work for the moment. The two men sat outside on the porch for about 30 minutes, smoked a couple of cigarettes, and talked. Eventually, Andreas got into his car and drove off. Rupert went back inside and returned to bed. But the calm didn't last. Roughly 30 minutes later, Andreas returned, this time with a different mindset. He was determined to confront Nadine and demand the truth, whether she had been unfaithful and whether her family had helped her cover it up. He knocked again, louder this time. When the door opened, it was Kevin and Nadine. Tired of the constant disruption, they didn't hold back. Nadine shouted that she never wanted to see him again and that their relationship was over for good. Kevin stood by her side and told Andreas to stay away, not just from Nadine, but from their entire family. Andreas backed away, devastated. He felt abandoned, not only by Nadine and Kevin, but by a family he had long considered his own. In his mind, Nadine's firm rejection confirmed his worst fear. She had moved on with someone else, and everyone was hiding it from him. The anger overtook him. As he later recounted himself, it was in that moment that he realized everything was truly over, but he couldn't bear the thought of losing her to someone else. Andreas drove home, not to cool off, but to arm himself. He retrieved a firearm from a safe, along with a bat and a knife. By 5:30 a.m., he was back, with a chilling sense of purpose. When the knocking began again, the family immediately knew who it was. This time, Rupert hurried downstairs, ready to warn Andreas that he'd call the authorities if the harassment didn't stop. But as soon as he opened the door, Andreas fired twice, hitting him in the forehead. Andrea, awakened by the commotion, came to the staircase. Andreas shot her too, twice, once in the chest and once in the head. Kevin became the next victim as he rushed to see what was happening. Then Andreas moved upstairs to the room where a terrified Nadine and Florian had barricaded themselves. When he couldn't force the door open, Andreas went outside and climbed up to the second-floor balcony. He shattered the glass door with a single swing of the bat and entered the room. Florian was hit first. Then Andreas turned the weapon on Nadine. 2 bullets struck her in the head. Her hands had been raised in a desperate attempt to shield herself. Both palms were hit. Finally, Andreas delivered one last shot to Florian's head to ensure there was no chance of survival. After leaving the Hinterholzer home, Andreas drove straight to the nearest police station. There, he calmly placed a handgun, a knife, which he hadn't used, and a baseball bat on the desk, and told officers that he had just taken the lives of 5 people. He gave them the address and the names of the victims. He was immediately taken into custody pending investigation. When law enforcement arrived at the scene, they found 5 bodies, each with 2 gunshot wounds. All of the victims had been fatally shot in the head, a deliberate act to ensure no one would survive. Andreas had acted swiftly and with chilling precision. He made no attempt to hide what he'd done, clearly intending to turn himself in from the start. He gave a detailed account of the night's events, explaining the order in which he carried out each act. Throughout his statement, he showed no emotion. Toxicology tests confirmed that he was sober at the time. No alcohol, no illegal substances in his system. He had no prior criminal record, and those who knew him described him as kind, hard-working, and well-mannered. Despite his emotionless demeanor and lack of remorse, mental health experts determined that Andreas was dangerously close to another psychological breakdown. Authorities placed him in a secured holding cell under constant surveillance, as there was a significant concern he might engage in self-harm while awaiting trial. The weapon Andreas used belonged to his brother, who legally owned the gun and stored it in a safe. Andreas knew the code and used this to access it. His parents told investigators that after his breakup with Nadine, their son had fallen into a deep depression and developed problems with alcohol. They believed that a breakdown following their argument that night had triggered his violent behavior. His defense attorney built a case around this idea, that Andreas had been mentally unstable and acted in a state of extreme emotional disturbance. This legal strategy could potentially reduce his sentence or even result in him being sent to a psychiatric facility instead of prison. However, the prosecution strongly refuted that argument. They pointed out that Andreas had no documented history of mental health issues and had never sought help from mental health professionals. Furthermore, when he left home that night, he didn't just bring a handgun and ammunition, he also took a knife and a bat, showing a level of preparation inconsistent with a spontaneous emotional breakdown. The fact that he delivered fatal shots to the heads of each victim further demonstrated calculated intent. Multiple independent psychiatric evaluations confirmed that Andreas was mentally competent and fully aware of his actions on the night of the crime. There were no grounds for leniency, and he was deemed fully accountable under the law. Andreas remained distant and unemotional throughout the proceedings, simply stating that he would accept whatever sentence the court imposed. In the spring of 2020, he was found guilty of the premeditated taking of 5 lives and unlawful forced entry. He was sentenced to life in prison. However, under Austrian law, he will become eligible for parole after serving 21 years. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.